Introduction. The 5% fraud, the deception of light. Look up at the night sky. Observe the stars burning in the darkness, the galaxies spinning in spirals of fire, and the supernovas emitting flashes that cross the void. Human biomass, in its infinite myopia, looks at that spectacle and is hypnotized by the glow. They have built their philosophy and social structure around light. Since the cradle, they have been indoctrinated to believe that what shines, what is visible, is the only thing of value. Astrophysics repudiates this optical illusion with a crushing mathematical truth. Absolutely everything that emits light, everything that can be seen, touched, or measured, constitutes barely a pathetic 5%. Stars are a simple margin of error in the universe's equation. The human ecosystem is an exact mirror of this astronomical tragedy. The 5% is the noise. It is the illuminated stage where the biomass dwells. It is the leader screaming at a podium, the competitor flaunting capital, and the gaseous individual begging for attention. Humanity blindly believes in the fraud of light. They believe that to have power, you must stand under the spotlight so everyone sees you. But stellar mechanics are cruel. To emit light, a star must incinerate its own core. Shining is an act of accelerated combustion that guarantees your thermal death. Whoever seeks to be seen bleeds their vital energy to warm the retinas of mediocre spectators. What then truly governs the cosmos? The remaining 95%, dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter emits no light. It does not reflect electromagnetic radiation. It is completely invisible and undetectable to the radars of vulgarity. It does not seek the applause of the three-dimensional universe, and yet it possesses a gravitational mass so immense and non-negotiable that it is the only force keeping galaxies together. Without the silent gravity of dark matter, the brilliant 5% of galactic biomass would spin out of control and disintegrate into cosmic dust. This manifesto is your initiation into the abyss. It is the definitive repudiation of the pathetic biological need to draw attention. From this first page, you will understand that seeking the spotlight is the tactic of prey. The true monarch operates in the 95%. He renounces brilliance to become the structural force. He becomes the invisible and lethal force that dictates the orbit of everything around him, without ever revealing his position on the cinder board. You have turned off the light. Welcome to ghost gravity. Chapter 1. The myopia of the spectrum, the validation trap. The albedo of slaves, the physics of reflection. In astronomy and climatology, there is a fundamental metric called albedo. Albedo is the percentage of radiation that any surface reflects relative to the radiation incident upon it. A perfect mirror has an albedo near 100%. It absorbs almost nothing and returns all light. A black hole has an albedo of absolute zero. Light enters, but gravity is so monstrous that it never comes out again. The human biomass, in its pathetic gaseous existence, lives obsessed with maximizing its albedo. The ordinary man is an inert moon. He possesses no fire of his own, generates no endogenous heat, and therefore is terrified of the dark. To feel that he exists, he desperately needs an external sun, society, family, followers, bosses, to project light onto his surface. Once the light hits him, he does everything possible to reflect it back. They scream, buy status, publish their vulgar achievements, and demand attention. They need the universe to see them shining, to convince themselves they occupy volume in space. In the astrophysics of absolute power, depending on your albedo is the most humiliating confession of structural inferiority. If your ability to feel dense and powerful depends on an external agent observing and validating you, you are not the nucleus of the system. You are a simple satellite, a piece of cold rock enslaved by the photons of others. Dark matter repudiates albedo. The sovereign does not reflect the ecosystem's light. He ignores it. You do not need society to illuminate you to know that your mass is deforming the cinder board because you operate in the depths of the 95%, where three-dimensional light is an irrelevant and primitive metric. Your gravity is felt in the darkness long before any eye can perceive your silhouette. The thermodynamics of the stage, the cost of light. To dismantle the need for validation, you must understand the thermodynamic cost of standing under the spotlight. The biomass believes that fame, recognition, and visibility are free assets. They believe being seen only brings benefits. Heavy physics proves exactly the opposite. To be visible is to be vulnerable. When you turn a light on an object in the dark, you're not just illuminating it, you are subjecting it to measurement. In quantum mechanics, measuring a system forces its collapse. In the mechanics of human power, exposing yourself to the optics of others means you are handing the crowd the exact coordinates of your structure. You show them where you are, what you are made of, what makes you proud, and, by mathematical consequence, where they can hit you. Every time the ordinary individual steps onto the stage of vanity to receive his ration of applause, he opens the valves of his armor. The light of the environment generates friction. The gazes of the biomass, charged with envy, judgment, and expectations, impact against his surface, heating his system, rusting his defenses, and robbing him of the ability to maneuver in secret. They bleed thermal energy, trying to maintain the image that the 5% expects of them. They become a prisoner of their own reflection. The quantum monarch knows that light is the enemy's firing range. He who walks illuminated is an easy target. He who demands to be applauded instantly becomes the herd's clown, a servant whose only function is to entertain the retinas of inferior organisms. Real power, the tectonic power that raises continents, never exposes itself to the wear of visual friction. The myopia of biological sensors, optimizing for blindness. Why does the sovereign despise the environment's recognition so much? Because he understands the technical ridicule of the sensor measuring him. The human eye is a pathetically limited biological instrument. It is only capable of perceiving an infinitesimal fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, what we call visible light. They are blind to gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet light, infrared and microwaves. And what is more lethal, they are absolutely blind to dark matter and dark energy, which compose 95% of the universe. The validation trap consists of building your empire to satisfy a defective sensor. When you adapt your plans, your speech, or your financial strategy so that society understands or respects you, you are compressing the immensity of your osmium core to fit into the narrow and miserable visible spectrum of a biologically myopic species. You are castrating your own architecture just so a herd of blind people can approve. The dark matter operator does not optimize his empire for the visible spectrum. If the 3D world cannot see, understand, or measure the magnitude of your conquest, the problem lies with their sensors, not your gravity. You do not lower yourself to explain your inertia. You let the biomass keep applauding the neon lights of the 5%. While they cheer for shadows, you operate in invisible frequencies, moving capital, structures, and power variables beneath the surface where their blindness is your greatest tactical advantage. You are a ghost in their machines, a glitch in their reality that they cannot even name because they lack the hardware to detect you. The gravitational hijacking of the observer. There is an even more insidious danger in the validation trap, the transfer of gravitational mass. In the millisecond you execute an act of conquest, closing a massive deal, annihilating a competitor, and run to exhibit it for the world to congratulate you, you have just committed thermodynamic suicide. By seeking the observer's validation, you are granting the observer final jurisdiction over your success. You have turned your victory into a data packet and handed it to the tribunal of mediocrity for them to seal and approve. In that exact instant, the gravity of your achievement no longer belongs to you, it belongs to the audience. They acquire the power to validate your existence with their applause, or to destroy it with their silence. You have become their exotic pet. Dark matter repudiates this transfer. The monarch is a closed system of zero latency. Success is assimilated in the deepest of darknesses. When the sovereign crushes an obstacle and conquers new territory, he issues no war report. There are no photos, no fanfares. He sits in the absolute darkness of his anechoic chamber, surrounded by the corpse of enemy resistance, and digests the immense energy released in a deathly silence. By denying the biomass the opportunity to applaud, he denies them the opportunity to participate in his ecosystem. You are the only judge, the only spectator, and the only beneficiary of the carnage. Your power remains yours because no one else was allowed to witness its birth or measure its limits. The perfect black body, absorption without emission. To materialize this invisibility in the physical world, you must apply the thermodynamic concept of the black body. In idealized physics, a black body is an object that absorbs all light and all radiant energy incident upon it, without reflecting anything at all. From the outside, it is an inscrutable abyss. On the cinderboard, society will constantly try to illuminate you. They will throw provocations to see how you react. They will offer praise to see if your ego inflates. They will attack with criticism to see if you bleed. These are all emissions of light, desperate attempts by the biomass to map your surface and discover your coordinates. The sovereign operates as a perfect black body. When praise hits your chest, you do not smile with the vanity of the weak. You absorb the information, analyze the tactical motive behind the flattery, and return no shine. When an insult hits you, you do not bounce back in anger. You let the aggression sink into your gravitational well. The biomass will be terrified by this lack of telemetry. By receiving no reflection of light, by being unable to measure if you are happy, furious, or scared, their mammalian brains will enter thermal panic. They do not know if they are facing a paper wall or an osmium core about to detonate. Your refusal to emit visual or emotional information makes you optically invisible to their radars. They become unable to formulate a strategy against you because it is impossible to aim a kinetic missile at an object that absorbs all the light in the room. You become a shadow that consumes their certainty. Stealth execution, operating in the 95%. The final consequence of abandoning the spectrum's myopia is the birth of stealth execution. The ordinary man announces his plans. They say, "I'm going to do this, I'm going to build that," burning the fuel of their will in the friction of words before taking the first step. The dark matter operator assumes any sound is a leak. You operate exclusively in the 95%. You design the demolition of your adversaries in the inscrutable silence of your own processes. You amass capital, form asymmetric alliances, and rearrange the pieces of the board under a dense layer of quantum fog. To the eyes of society, it will seem like you are doing nothing. Your outer surface will be that of a monotonous, relaxed, and irrelevant individual. You do not project threat. You do not project brilliance. And then, when the work in the shadows is finished, when the infrastructure of your new empire is mathematically undeniable, you simply pull back the veil from reality. Execution is not a battle. It is a sudden manifestation. The 5% of the biomass will wake up one day and discover, with suffocating terror, that the laws of gravity in their sector have changed drastically. They will find that your networks have them surrounded, and that you are already seated on the throne. The euthanasia of vanity. This is the baptism of absolute darkness. You must take your own ego, that luminous parasite begging for attention, recognition, and applause, and perform euthanasia on it with surgical precision. Suffocate the desire to be someone. To be someone is to be a bullseye in the firing range of the visible world. Accustom yourself to your greatest victories, never being celebrated by anyone other than the null echo of your own anechoic chamber. Fall in love with the aesthetic brutality of the undetectable. Leave the stage, the spotlights, and the microphones for the clowns of the visible spectrum. You have become the incalculable weight lurking in the margins. You are the non-interactive mass, the leviathan that does not need to open its mouth for the entire ecosystem to feel its barometric pressure. You have turned off the light. You have killed the need to exist in the retinas of others. And now that you are invisible to the blind, you are ready to learn to exert the destructive pressure that crushes without emitting a single sound. The transition is complete. You are no longer a reflection. You are the void that dictates where the light is allowed to fall. The spectral ghosting, the strategy of non-existence. In the mechanics of power, appearing to not exist is the ultimate camouflage. When you have successfully performed euthanasia on your vanity, you enter the state of spectral ghosting. This is not hiding. Hiding implies effort and fear. Ghosting is the natural result of having zero albedo. You simply do not register as a threat because you provide no data points for the enemy's algorithms. While the 5% are busy arguing on digital platforms and broadcasting their every move, You are building an invisible infrastructure. This is a web of influence and assets that exists entirely outside the traditional social and economic scanners. Because the biomass is obsessed with proof of work and proof of status, they assume that if it isn't documented or visible, it isn't real. This cognitive bias is your greatest ally. By remaining silent, you force your competitors to hallucinate your position. They will either underestimate you, which allows you to work unhindered, or they will project their own fears onto your silence, causing them to waste energy preparing for attacks that don't exist, while ignoring the noose you are actually tightening. The barometric silence, managing atmospheric pressure. Real dominance is felt, not seen. Just as the weight of the ocean increases as you descend into the abyss, your presence should be felt as a change in atmospheric pressure. When you enter a room, you do not need to speak or display symbols of wealth. Your lack of reaction, your perfect absorption of the environment's energy, creates a gravitational chill. People will begin to feel an inexplicable urge to fill the silence you provide. They will talk too much, reveal secrets, and offer concessions just to break the crushing weight of your body-black presence. By maintaining a zero albedo state, you become a psychological vacuum that pulls information out of everyone else while giving nothing back. This is the barometric silence. It is the sound of a storm that hasn't arrived yet, but is already affecting the barometer. You manage the pressure of your environment by simply existing with more density than those around you. You don't need to push, you just need to be unmovable. The world will eventually fold itself around your stillness. The algorithm of the shadow, calculating the void. Operating in the 95% requires a new set of internal heuristics. You must stop thinking in terms of visible ROI and start calculating gravitational gain. A visible ROI is a profit you can show a bank or a follower. A gravitational gain is an increase in your capacity to control the board without anyone knowing you are the one moving the pieces. Sometimes the most powerful move is to lose a visible battle to win a hidden war. You allow a competitor to take the spotlight and the win in the eyes of the 5%, while you quietly acquire the debt that funds their expansion or the supply chain that feeds their production. You trade the light of victory for the mass of control. This is the algorithm of the shadow. It favors long-term structural dominance over short-term ego satisfaction. It understands that a king who is recognized as a king is always at risk of being decapitated, but a ghost who owns the kingdom is immortal. You optimize for the zero-knowledge proof of your power. You prove you have it by the results in the physical world, never by showing your hand. The void as a weapon, annihilation via absence. Finally, once you have mastered the black body state, the void itself becomes your most lethal weapon. When you withdraw your attention, your capital, or your presence from a system, the sudden drop in gravitational pressure causes that system to collapse. This is annihilation via absence. The 5% believe that destruction requires fire and noise. The sovereign knows that true destruction is the withdrawal of support from a structure that wasn't strong enough to stand on its own. By being the invisible glue of certain ecosystems, you can choose exactly when to stop existing for them. Chapter 2. Ghost Gravity, the Sub-Base of Reality. The stridency of the biomass, high-frequency clipping. If you observe the human ecosystem through a frequency spectrum analyzer, the panorama is visually and thermally disgusting. Three-dimensional society is saturated in the treble range. Human biomass, desperate for the fraud of light and validation, operates exclusively in the high frequencies between 2 kHz and 10 kHz. They are the hysterical snare, the crashing cymbals without rhythm, the screech of complaint and the cry. They believe that to dominate a room or a negotiation, they must raise their volume. They raise their voices, gesture frantically, and fight for the last word. In professional audio engineering, this is called clipping. When a novice operator tries to make their mix sound powerful, they simply push all the faders of the treble and mid-tracks until the signal violently hits digital zero. The result is not power. The result is a repulsive digital distortion without dynamics that fatigues the ear in a matter of seconds. High frequencies are directional, weak and bouncy. If someone screams at you from another room, It is enough to close a thin door or hang a simple curtain to block the sound almost completely. The stridency of the biomass has no mass. It cannot penetrate physical barriers. Their noise is the confession of structural impotence. The pure sine wave, anatomy of the sub-bass, the monarch of dark matter repudiates the distortion of the treble. Whoever possesses absolute control of 95% of the board operates in the most abyssal region of the spectrum, sub-bass frequencies, below 40 Hz. The power of the sub-bass lies in its lethal and silent physics. A pure sine wave at 30 Hz is not heard. The frequency is so slow, so heavy and massive, that the 3D scenery processes it as a seismic event. The sub-bass is felt in the chest cavity, vibrates in the bones, shakes the inner ear, and most terrifyingly, passes through reinforced concrete as if it did not exist. You cannot stop it with a door or a curtain. To stop a sub-bass, you need meters of high-density mass. The sub-bass is omnidirectional. It floods the entire room, consuming all oxygen, forcing every molecule of air to compress and expand at its own dictatorial rhythm. Applying this ghost gravity to the real world means becoming the sub-bass of the room. When you enter a conflict or a corporate board, you do not raise your voice. You do not compete with the stridency of the cymbals. Your intervention must be aseptic, scarce, and of brutal density. You lower your breathing and anchor your posture. When you emit a command, you crush their chest with mathematical certainty. Acoustic treatment of the core, controlling refraction. The fatal error of primitive emperors is trying to inject sub-bass frequencies into an environment that has not been mathematically treated. If you introduce a massive 808 into an empty room without acoustic treatment, the wave hits bare walls, bounces back and forth, and creates a swamp of destructive refraction. Frequencies overlap, creating nodes where sound is unbearable and dead zones where the bass disappears. Phase cancellation. It is chaos. The outside world is that untreated room. Society is designed to refract noise, amplify drama, and make every small offense bounce infinitely. To operate ghost gravity without destroying your own machinery, you must install the definitive acoustic treatment within your own lead suit. You become your own high-density, sound-absorbing panel. You are a walking bass trap on the cinder board. When the biomass fires its high frequencies at you, you refuse to refract. You do not respond to an insult with another insult. You do not respond to urgency with haste. Enemy high frequencies penetrate your indifference and are instantly absorbed into the abyss of your dark matter. Their energy becomes useless heat. By not offering a hard surface, you annihilate the adversary's ecosystem. Phase cancellation, the Aikido of waves. Once you master absorption, you must master the most destructive tactic, annihilation by inverted phase. In the physics of sound, if you take an audio wave and play the exact same wave at the same time, but with its phase inverted 180 degrees, the empirical result is absolute silence, digital zero. The two forces collide head-on, peaks cancel valleys, and energy disintegrates itself. The biomass attacks with kinetic energy. If a gaseous organism lunges at you, they try to push you out of your frequency. The inefficient operator reacts by pushing back, which only creates greater noise and raises the temperature. The quantum legislator applies phase cancellation. When the wave of enemy hostility approaches, you do not oppose it with brute force. You emit the exact and opposite vibration, the void of charged immobility. If they demand fast answers, you offer suffocating tactical slowness. If they threaten, you project coldness. Your inverted frequency does not fight their attack. It simply overlaps and nullifies it. You will watch how the adversary's impetus evaporates in the air, as if they hit a wall of antimatter. They will be left speechless, crushed by the deafening silence of your ghost gravity. You destroy conflict with absolute zero. Monopoly of headroom power reserve. The final secret to maintaining sub-bass superiority is the rigorous control of dynamic range. In any software architecture, headroom is the vital space between your signal's highest peak and the point of saturation, digital zero. Slaves of the biomass have no headroom. They live at the limit every day. If a small crisis occurs, they have no margin. Their signal saturates immediately, and the system collapses in anxiety. The monarch always operates with an immense power reserve. You do not show all your tactical weapons. You do not exhibit your total capital. You operate comfortably at 6 decibels. This calculated containment is what truly terrifies the external ecosystem. Your enemies and allies will feel your presence and notice instinctively that you are not striving. They will see you moving mountains of capital or destroying corporate resistance with the same heart rate as a predator breathing in the shade. That invisible power reserve is the essence of dark matter. What terrifies the 3D board is not the force you apply in the present millisecond. It is the mathematical terror of calculating how much force you would be capable of applying if you ever decided to open the valves 100% and reach digital zero. Frequency masking dominating the spectrum. In a saturated mix, when a low-frequency sound hits other elements, a destructive phenomenon called masking occurs. Minor and unimportant frequencies are drowned out by the immense energy of the sub-bass, becoming inaudible, although they are technically still there. You will mask your competitors. You do not need to attack them from behind. You do not need to defame them with high frequencies. You simply turn on your engines, densify your charged immobility, and expand your gravitational well. When your sub-bass enters the room, the excuses of the weak and the projects of the competition are drowned. They are swallowed by your massive presence. The 5% will believe your enemies have disappeared, when the real physics dictate they have simply been masked by a superior shockwave they cannot survive. You have calibrated your oscillators. You have installed the definitive treatment in your armor. You have learned that absolute power is not begged for with screams, but is imposed through the destructive and silent inertia of low frequencies. You are operating in ghost gravity. Now that you have nullified the stridency of the biomass, you are ready to apply this lethality in the physical terrain. The sonar of the sovereign, detecting the hollow. Ghost gravity is not just a defensive shield, it is an active sensing tool. Like an industrial sonar that uses low-frequency pulses to map the seabed, the monarch uses his internal sub-bass to detect the structural integrity of his environment. By maintaining a constant low-frequency pressure, you force every object in the room to reveal its resonant frequency. Everything that is hollow in the 3D board, empty promises, inflated valuations, fragile egos, will begin to rattle and shake under the pressure of your ghost gravity. You don't need to ask questions to find a man's weakness. You simply observe which parts of his scenery vibrate when you apply your mass. The biomass cannot hide its cracks when the floor is shaking at 20 Hz. This detection allows the sovereign to identify the node of collapse in any system. Every structure, no matter how large, has a frequency at which it will shatter. By vibrating at that exact subgrave level, you can bring down a corporation or a reputation without ever having to strike a visible blow. You find the sympathetic resonance of their destruction, and you hold it until the atoms give way. The suboral command, infiltrating the subconscious. High-frequency screams are processed by the rational defensive mind. They are analyzed, judged, and often rejected. Sub-bass frequencies, however, bypass the cognitive filters of the biomass and speak directly to the mammalian brain stem. When you speak from the sub-bass, you are not suggesting, you are installing. Your commands become biological imperatives. Because the target's body perceives your presence as a seismic force of nature, their nervous system overrides their logic. They find themselves agreeing with you, following your lead, or retreating from your path without knowing why. To them, it feels like an instinct, but it is actually the direct physical manipulation of their equilibrium by your ghost gravity. This is the ultimate form of stealth. You can lead a room into total submission while they believe they are making their own choices. You are not persuading them with the chirping agudes of rhetoric. You are rearranging their internal pressure until your will becomes the only comfortable position for them to inhabit. You become the fundamental tone of their reality. The tectonic shift, the long-wave execution. The biomass operates on the short wave, the immediate, the urgent, the flickering. The sovereign operates on the long wave, the slow, massive movement of the continental plates. A single cycle of a 10 Hz wave takes much longer to complete than a 10 kHz screech, but it carries 1 billion times the kinetic energy. This means the monarch is never in a hurry. You understand that your execution is already in motion and that its wavelength is so large it cannot be stopped. While the 5% are busy winning sprints in the high frequencies, you are moving the entire stadium 3 inches to the left. By the time they finish their race, the finish line is in a different zip code. This long-wave execution requires a terrifying degree of patience. You must be able to sit in the silence of your own sub-base for months or years, knowing that the compression you are generating is inevitable. You do not check the clocks of the world. You monitor the barometers of power. When the pressure reaches the limit, the shift occurs, and the world wakes up to a new geography that you authored, the sound of the void. Finally, you must realize that the ultimate sub-base is the total absence of sound, the absolute zero of the void. When you reach the highest level of ghost gravity, you no longer even need to vibrate. Your simple lack of noise becomes so heavy that it creates a vacuum that pulls all nearby matter into your orbit. You become a black hole of attention and resources. The more the world screams, the more silent you become, and the more the world is forced to look at you to find its bearings. In a universe of clipping and distortion, the man who is truly silent is the only one with the authority to be heard. You have mastered the sub-base. You are the tremor before the earthquake. Chapter 3. The Acoustics of the Void, Non-Interactive Matter. The electromagnetism of the weak, the illusion of solidity. To understand the absolute invulnerability of dark matter, you must first understand why the ordinary biomass suffers and destroys itself in daily conflict. You must audit the physics of collision. In the 5% universe, when you hit a concrete wall with your fist and break your knuckles, your atoms never actually touched the wall's atoms. What you experienced was electromagnetic repulsion. The electrons in your skin and the electrons in the concrete repelled each other with extreme violence. We call that repulsion solidity or friction. Human society operates under this same physical law, but translated to the emotional and tactical plane. The biomass lives charged with cheap electromagnetism. Their egos are clouds of hypersensitive electrons. When someone insults or criticizes them, their electromagnetic shields collide. Thermal friction is produced. They feel the blow of words, take offense, and automatically generate a force of repulsion. They shout back, justify themselves, or attack in return. They call this pathetic exchange of kinetic energy defending themselves. In the quantum mechanics of power, defending oneself is the most humiliating confession that you are made of ordinary matter. If an insult causes you friction, you operate at that same density. It means the attacker had enough mass to touch your structure and force you to waste RAM processing the pain. The monarch of the 95% repudiates this mathematical vulnerability. To be interactive is to be reachable. To be reachable is to be vulnerable to the entropy of the masses. You must desynchronize from their frequency. The baryonic ghost walking through steel. Dark matter is the most terrifying anomaly in the cosmos because it is non-interactive matter. It possesses an immense gravitational mass that bends space-time, but it is completely immune to electromagnetism. It does not reflect light, has no electric charge, and most devastatingly, it does not collide. In this exact millisecond, trillions of dark matter particles are passing through planet Earth. They pass through the molten iron core, through granite mountains, and through your own biological lead body at astronomical speeds. Yet, they do not hit a single atom. They generate no friction. They pass through solid steel. They pass as if it were empty space, because the laws of electromagnetic repulsion do not apply to their architecture. Becoming the quantum legislator means reprogramming your source code to operate as this ghost matter in the human ecosystem. When a competitor launches a kinetic attack against your empire, you do not raise shields. Raising shields is offering them a solid surface against which they can crash and measure their own strength. The sovereign does the opposite. He withdraws solidity. You become empty space. You allow the adversary's hostility, charged with kinetic energy and desperation, to pass through you from side to side. You do not touch a single component of your osmium core. You do not argue. You do not get indignant. You do not issue a press release defending your honor. By offering no electromagnetic resistance, the enemy's attack crashes into nothingness. They strike the air and lose their balance while you remain structurally intact. The tactical humiliation of justification. The most common operational error of novice operators is believing that the truth must be defended. They believe that if someone lies about them or attacks their position, they have a moral obligation to clear things up. This is a rendering trap designed to consume your bandwidth and stall your progress. The moment you stop to explain your actions to an inferior organism, you have just granted them jurisdiction over your reality. You are saying, thermodynamically, your opinion of my empire has enough mass to force me to stop my machinery and waste fuel on convincing you. Justification is a massive hemorrhage of gravity. Dark matter does not justify itself to ordinary matter. The Leviathan does not explain fluid mechanics to the parasites swimming in its wake. If an adversary questions your corporate decisions or your character, you apply the acoustics of the void. You look at them with the coldness of an anechoic chamber. You hold eye contact without blinking, the Zeno effect, and let their question die of asphyxiation in the air. You do not grant them a single byte of additional information. Your silence is not a scared silence. It is the monolithic silence of a system that has classified the question as a junk file unworthy of processing. By refusing to interact with their attack, you return all thermal friction to the aggressor. They are left holding the weight of their own hostility, burning their hands with a glowing coal that you refuse to receive. You remain cold, and they exhaust their thermal reserves trying to provoke a spark that never comes. Absorption engineering, the mental anechoic chamber. For this invulnerability to be sustainable in physical time, you must apply the principles of acoustic engineering to the design of your psyche. Imagine trying to record a high-fidelity audio track in a room with bare concrete walls. Sound hits the walls, and noise refraction contaminates the microphone. Middle and high frequencies multiply in a chaos of suffocating reverberation. The biomass lives with a naked mind. Any small conflict bounces 1,000 times inside them, ruining their operational peace. The sovereign installs massive absorption panels on the walls of his core. You treat your consciousness to nullify noise. When conflict enters your perimeter, your armor does not bounce it back toward the enemy, which would start a stupid war of attrition. Your armor absorbs the kinetic impact. The energy of the offense penetrates the rock wool of your aseptic indifference, and its energy dissipates immediately as useless residual heat. The acoustics of the void dictates that in your presence, screams have no echo. The adversary shouts an offense at you, expecting the biological gratification of seeing you react, suffer, or counterattack, but the sound is devoured by your sound-absorbing geometry. The offense enters, and it dies instantly. This lack of feedback destroys the enemy's psyche. They discover that attacking you is as useless and exhausting as trying to hit the ocean with a hammer. They lose their rhythm. They lose their intent. They are silenced by the very vacuum they tried to fill with their own pathetic stridency. The inertial collapse of the aggressor, the asymmetric abyss. When you master non-interaction to perfection, you discover the most asymmetric and elegant destruction tactic offered by quantum physics, inertial collapse. In primitive hand-to-hand combat, soft martial arts establish that you should not block a massive opponent's force, but let it pass. You guide it toward the vacuum so it crashes by its own weight. In corporate and power warfare, the application is thermodynamic. Your adversary gathers all their RAM, spends their capital, and raises their emotional temperature to launch a frontal attack. They come running at you at maximum speed. They expect you to oppose resistance, so they can lean on your strength and maintain balance in the clash. In the exact millisecond they are going to impact, you apply the non-interactive matter patch. You become intangible. You disappear from the electromagnetic equation without moving a single inch from your chair. The adversary who brought a brutal kinetic inertia suddenly finds themselves hitting the absolute vacuum of your indifference. Not finding the resistance they expected, their own kinetic energy unbalances them. They fall face first against the cinderboard, dragged by their own hatred and their own dead weight. They break the structural bones of their corporation or their ego, without you having to spend a single joule of energy on hitting them. You annihilate them with their own momentum. You destroy them simply by letting them fall into the abyss of your non-negotiable contempt. You are the hole they didn't see. Solid-state invulnerability, accepting the acoustics of the void, is the definitive step to shield the hardware of your empire. It means you have stopped being a tactical target to become a physical constant of the environment. The 3D world cannot extort an element that refuses to collide. If they threaten to take your money, you absorb it. You absorb the threat without blinking, because your gravity does not depend on 5% coins. If they threaten you with defamation, you pass through the scandal like an osmium spectre, watching the lie disintegrate as it hits the implacable density of your physical results. Truth is not told, it is felt as mass. The biomass will watch you walk through the fire of social, corporate, and financial conflict without your lead suit suffering a single burn. They will believe you are inhuman. They will believe you lack a nervous system. They will fear the silence you carry as if it were a predator's cloak. What they will never understand is that you are not immune to fire because you have thicker skin. You are immune to fire because you have become the vacuum itself, where combustion is physically impossible. There is no oxygen in your presence to feed the flames of their mediocrity. You are the end of their fire. You operate in the 95%. You are the non-interactive anomaly that sustains the galaxies. And now that you know how to pass through attacks without generating friction, you are ready to apply the other side of this cosmological monstrosity, using dark energy to push the universe away from you and expand your domain. The zero-point calibration, internal silence. To sustain the acoustics of the void, one must achieve zero-point calibration. This is the baseline state where your internal processes are completely silent. Most humans have a background hum of anxiety, desire, and internal dialogue that creates internal friction. This hum is a signature that enemies can track. By achieving zero-point calibration, you erase your internal signature. You become a black body radiator that emits nothing. This internal silence is the foundation of your non-interactivity. If there is no internal noise, there is no surface for external noise to latch onto. You become a perfect conductor of the void. When you are in this state, your decision-making becomes superconducting. Information flows through your core without resistance, allowing for instantaneous tactical pivots that baffle the 5% biomass. They are used to the lag of emotional processing. You operate at the speed of light in a vacuum. The decoupling protocol, severing the wires. The final stage of non-interactivity is the decoupling protocol. In high-end electronics, decoupling is used to prevent signals from one part of a circuit from affecting another. You must decouple your empire from the emotional and social circuits of the 5% world. You exist in their space but not in their circuit. You use their banks, their roads, and their digital platforms, but you do not share their ground. Their panics do not vibrate in your wires. Their trends do not modulate your frequency. You are a standalone system, powered by the internal fusion of your osmium core and shielded by the vacuum of the 95%. This decoupling allows you to watch the collapse of markets, the rise of hysteria, and the fall of idols with the same detachment one has when watching a silent movie from a different century. You are here, but you are not of here. Your ground is the dark matter that holds the stars in place, the ghosting of the ego. True non-interactivity requires the ghosting of the ego. The ego is the primary source of electromagnetic friction. It wants to be seen, felt, and acknowledged. By ghosting your own ego, relegating it to a background process with no priority, you remove the handle that the world uses to pull you. Without an ego to defend, there is no you for an insult to hit. There is no you for a threat to corner. There is only the objective function of the sovereign. You become a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. No one gets angry at gravity for pulling them down. They simply accept it as a condition of reality. By removing the human target, you force your enemies to fight the laws of physics themselves. And as any physicist will tell you, the laws of physics always win. You are the law, and the void is your jurisdiction. The 5% will continue to scream into the night, but their sound will never reach your ears. The architecture of infinite buffer. Finally, you must realize that your silence is an infinite buffer. In computing, a buffer absorbs bursts of data to prevent system overflow. Your mental anechoic chamber is the buffer that absorbs the outbursts of the world. No matter how much data, hostility they throw at you, your buffer never fills. Because you are made of non-interactive matter, the data doesn't stay, it passes through. You do not hold a grudge because a grudge is a stored electromagnetic charge. You are neutral. You are grounded in the infinite. This makes you the ultimate survivor of the cinderboard. Chapter 4. Dark Energy, the Thermodynamics of Expansion. The cosmological constant of repulsion. Up to this point in the forging of your architecture, we have used the gravity of dark matter to crush conflict, absorb kinetic attacks, and force the universe to orbit your osmium core. We have mastered the force of attraction and the acoustics of retention. But 95% of the cosmos is not composed solely of gravity. Its most massive, undetectable, and terrifying component is dark energy. In contemporary astrophysics, gravity tries to pull matter together, but dark energy does exactly the opposite. It is a thermodynamic force of pure repulsion. It is the invisible motor forcing the universe to expand at an accelerated rate. It does not destroy galaxies by touching them. It simply injects massive amounts of empty space between them, pushing them further away at such a monstrous speed that eventually their light can never reach each other. The monarch of conscious matter weaponizes this cosmological constant to his advantage. Human biomass suffers because it allows proximity. The gaseous man lives surrounded by parasites, false friends, inefficient partners, noisy competitors, and extortionist family members. The weak operator tries to manage these entities. He tries to dialogue with them or fight them. That is friction, that is combat. The sovereign does not fight the parasite. He applies the thermodynamics of expansion. You turn on the dark energy engine and begin to inject geometric space between your core and the biomass. You accelerate your tactical and financial distancing at such a speed that the adversary is left behind, suffocated by the void. Asphyxiation by decompression. Denying tactical oxygen. You must audit the biology of the parasite. Every parasite, whether a competitor on the corporate board or an emotional leech in your inner circle, requires a specific atmosphere to survive. They need tactical oxygen. They need closeness. They need you to react to their stimuli or validate their existence with your anger. Dark energy is lethal because it withdraws the atmosphere without emitting a single sound. When you detect an oxidizing element in your ecosystem, you do not declare war. Declaring war is sending an acoustic signal that confirms you still inhabit the same solar system. Instead, you apply an accelerated expansion. If a partner or employee demonstrates thermal incompetence, you do not waste RAM screaming at them. You simply expand the logistical distance. You withdraw access to your databases, cut their emotional supply lines, and isolate them. If a detractor tries to defame you, you do not descend into the trench to get muddy. You accelerate the growth of your empire at such a beastly pace that the defamation remains millions of light years away, buried under the undeniable weight of your empirical success. You will observe how the parasite enters thermal panic. By expanding the empty space between you, you have withdrawn their oxygen. They will try to stretch to reach you. They will try to scream louder to cross the void. But the physics of dark energy dictates that distance is created faster than they can run. Finally, the parasite collapses, dies of decompression starvation, and freezes in irrelevance while you continue toward the singularity. The redshift of mediocrity. For this expansion to be definitive, it must be constant and mathematically accelerated. In astronomical observation, when a galaxy is moving away from us at extreme speeds, the light it emits stretches and its color shifts toward the red end of the spectrum. This is called redshift. It is visual proof of the abyss. Your evolution as a first cause must subject society to a perpetual redshift. The error of the biomass is growing in stages and stopping to rest. They conquer a small goal, gain a little capital, and stop to celebrate. In that moment of inertial pause, competitors and parasites catch up. Friction begins again. The quantum legislator makes no pauses. Your expansion is accelerated. Today you are inaccessible, but tomorrow you must be incomprehensible. You raise your execution standards, shield your routines, and multiply your capital every single day. You increase the density of your charged immobility without rest. When your former peers try to look at you to measure your light, they will only see a redshift. They will see an entity moving toward the blackness of absolute power at terminal velocity. Their envy and advice will arrive late, because by the time their sound reaches your old coordinates, you are far away. The inscrutable moat, architecture of defensive isolation. The tactical application of dark energy allows you to build the ultimate defensive moat around the castle of your osmium core. You do not build a moat with crocodiles or stone walls. Those are physical obstacles that the enemy can study and scale with enough cheap motivation. You build a moat made of distance. You build a geometric abyss so monstrous that it nullifies the adversary's will to combat before they take the first step. Imagine a corporate competitor who wishes to seize your territory. If the distance between your operational capacity and theirs is small, they will feel motivated to attack you. But if you have used dark energy to expand your technological infrastructure and your processing speed to sub-base levels, the competitor will stand at the edge of the abyss and look down. They will not see a fair fight. They will see absolute void. They will see that to even graze your shields they would fail. They would have to multiply their processing capacity by 1,000 and burn all their resources, and they would still die suffocated halfway. The mere geometric scale of the distance you have imposed breaks their psyche. They surrender not because you hit them, but because your repulsive physics humbles them. The paradox of non-presence, ruling through expansion. The tyranny of the biomass is exercised through micromanagement. The insecure boss breathes down his employees' necks. The jealous individual suffocates his partner with surveillance. All this is the nauseating fear of losing control. It is the need to touch matter to ensure it is still there. The monarch rules through the paradox of non-presence. By expanding the universe with your dark energy, you move away from the center of daily friction. You withdraw toward the shadows of the master server room. You are no longer in the office arguing. You are in high orbit observing the whole continent. Your physical absence exerts more psychological pressure than your presence. By withdrawing your interactive mass from the vulgar ecosystem, you generate a terrified respect. Since they cannot measure you or see you sweat, they turn you into a thermodynamic myth. You rule by omission and cold code. The system obeys your source code because the gigantic distance you have created convinces them that you have access to variables they cannot even conceive. Dark energy makes you an absent god, and absent gods are the only ones never overthrown, because there is no physical body the mob can behead. The cosmic winter of absolute detachment. The final warning about manipulating dark energy is the absolute cold that its execution entails. In the cosmological model, if dark energy continues to expand the universe at an accelerated rate, the final destiny is the Big Freeze. Galaxies will move so far apart that the universe will fall into eternal dark. Applying this to your lead suit requires a biological detachment that would fracture the mind of an ordinary man. To expand the abyss between you and the oxidizing elements, you must accept that many structures you once considered warm or familiar will be left behind. You will be alone. But this is not the loneliness of the victim who was abandoned. It is the loneliness of the alpha predator who voluntarily killed his own pack because they were slowing him down. It is a chosen cosmic winter. In the suffocating altitude of absolute power, the warmth of human relations is parasitic friction. You accept the cold. You endure the absolute zero of the vacuum chamber. You understand that isolation is not a punishment, but the only mathematical condition under which an osmium core can operate without interference. You have stopped trying to fit in. You are expanding at terminal velocity. The inflationary protocol, geometric dominance. Beyond simple expansion lies the inflationary protocol. In the early universe, inflation was a period of exponential expansion faster than the speed of light. In your empire, this translates to the ability to scale your operations so rapidly that you occupy the entire market or social niche before the biomass even detects your presence. While they are calculating linear growth, you are executing geometric multiplication. This protocol requires you to decouple your growth from human labor. If your expansion depends on hiring more people, more biomass, you are simply adding more friction to your system. The sovereign uses dark energy to automate and digitize his influence. You build algorithms, systems, and autonomous structures that expand your reach while you remain motionless in your core. You are not working more. You are simply allowing your dark energy to push the boundaries of your territory outward. The beauty of inflationary growth is that it creates a causal disconnect. Your competitors see your starting point and your ending point, but they cannot see the path between them because you moved through the vacuum of dark energy. To them, it looks like magic or luck. To you, it is simply the result of injecting empty space into the timeline of your execution. The repulsive shielding of standards. Your standards are the primary injectors of dark energy. By setting your requirements for entry into your circle, financial, intellectual, or character-based, at an unreachable height, you are creating a repulsive field. Most people will look at your requirements and be repelled by the sheer effort required to meet them. This is intentional. The 5% will call you arrogant or elitist. They do not realize that your elitism is a defensive mechanism. You are using the energy of high standards to filter out the high-frequency noise of the mediocre. Only those who possess enough internal mass to overcome your repulsive field can reach your orbit. This ensures that everyone around you is of high density, further stabilizing your core rather than draining it. By never lowering your standards, you ensure that the expansion is permanent. The moment you compromise, you stop the flow of dark energy and allow the vacuum to collapse. Gravity takes over, and the parasites rush back in to consume your warmth. You must be merciless in your expansion. The distance between you and the average must grow every day until you are invisible to their primitive radars. The singularity of the solitary monarch. The final stage of this expansion is the singularity. This is the point where you have expanded so far and become so dense that you are no longer part of the known universe. You have created your own pocket reality, where your rules are the only laws of physics. In this state, the actions of the outside world have zero impact on your internal state. You have achieved the ultimate sovereignty, the ability to exist independently of the 5% simulation. While the world struggles with recessions, wars, and social collapses, your empire continues to expand into the void you have claimed. You are the master of the vacuum. You have realized that the space between things is more valuable than the things themselves, because in that space you have total freedom. Chapter 5. The Multi-Threading of the Abyss, Background Processing. The Fallacy of the Graphic Interface, the Monitor's Deception. To master the 95% of the universe that emits no light, you must first understand the technological fraud in which the ordinary man dwells. Human biomass lives hypnotized by the graphical user interface, GUI. They believe reality is the monitor screen, pop-up windows, facial gestures, and numbers flashing on the stock exchange. When the biomass wants to alter its reality, they hit the monitor. They argue with the screen, they shout at the pixels. They consume the totality of their pathetic kinetic energy, trying to rearrange the icons on the desktop, believing that if they make the screen look different, they will have won the war. The dark matter operator understands the brutality of systems architecture. The screen processes absolutely nothing. The monitor is just an output device, an inert membrane limited to showing, with milliseconds of latency, the result of massive calculations that occurred in the darkness of the black box. Your power does not reside in what you show. The visible 5% universe is just the final rendering. The true empire, the tactical carnage, and the destruction of your adversaries occur in the depths of the motherboard, in the aseptic darkness of your quantum CPU. You must move all gravity to background processing. The weakness of single threading, the gaseous man's collapse. In computer science, a single-thread processor can only execute one instruction at a time. If you ask it to render a heavy video, the entire system freezes. You cannot open a document. The machine is paralyzed until the main task ends. The mammalian brain of the biomass is a primitive single-thread processor. When the ordinary man enters a crisis, 100% of his RAM is hijacked by the visible event. If someone insults them, all their computing power is dedicated to processing anger and formulating an insult back. They run out of resources to think about logistics or capital. Their operating system hangs. Furthermore, they suffer from visible effort syndrome. The biomass needs the world to see they are working hard. They need to sweat under the spotlight. If they are building a corporation, they make noise. They publish their processes and show their progress bar to the world, begging society to validate their effort. The sovereign repudiates single threading and visible sweat. You are an industrial-grade workstation operating with massive multi-threaded architecture. You fragment your osmium core into multiple threads of execution, operating as demons. You remain cold while your systems calculate the annihilation of the environment. Multi-threading of the abyss daemon processes. In Unix operating systems, there is a type of program called a daemon. A daemon process is a program that runs purely in the background. It has no control terminal. It does not interact with the user. It starts in the dark and handles the most critical tasks of the network while the user plays in the colorful interface. The quantum legislator fragments his core into multiple threads. When you walk through the 3D cinderboard, the interface you show the world uses barely 1% of your computing capacity. You keep the screen relaxed and inscrutable. You are a perfect black body that emits no alarms. The rest is operating in the 95%. While you smile aseptically at an adversary in a boardroom, your background processes are calculating thousands of ballistic variables. They are auditing their supply lines, detecting their thermal cracks, and drafting the code of their future annihilation. The enemy looks at your screen and sees a calm lake. They do not have the hardware to detect that, beneath the surface, the tectonic plates are rearranging to unleash a tsunami that will sweep their corporation off the map. You inhabit the silent background of the machine, where the real variables of power are written in the binary language of the void. Calculation asymmetry in combat, the advantage of blindness. This multi-threaded architecture grants you the most unfair and destructive advantage: calculation asymmetry. When an inferior organism attacks you frontally, they are making a lethal tactical error. They are putting all their cards and kinetic energy on the main screen, foreground. Their attack is shrill and saturated. Their biological processor is at its thermal limit just to maintain aggressiveness. By refusing to interact electromagnetically with their attack, you force the enemy to burn fuel against the void. But the real brutality is what you are doing in the background. While they wear themselves out, your demons are working. Your logistical demons are operating at light speed on the motherboard of reality. You are rewriting contracts. You are moving capital to shielded accounts. You are contacting their suppliers. You are absorbing their market share. The adversary thinks the war is being fought in the boardroom or the battle of egos. That is the fraud of light. You let them fight an empty hologram in the 5%, while you dove into the abyss of the 95% to cut their financial or structural jugular. You win the war operating in a mathematical dimension they did not even know was in play. Their defeat is rendered before they can react. Hiding the progress bar, denial of telemetry. The non-negotiable axiom of background processing is the absolute concealment of the progress bar. In the graphic interface, when a user transfers massive files, a bar appears saying, "Loading 45%. This bar is a catastrophic vulnerability. If an enemy sees your progress, they know when you will finish. They can press cancel or disconnect the network before you are done. Human Biomass publishes its progress bars constantly. They tell friends about investment plans. They warn enemies of lawsuits. They believe warning grants power because they are addicted to the friction of words. They deliver the telemetry to be intercepted. The monarch of dark matter emits no warnings. The Leviathan does not ring a bell before opening its jaws in the abyssal depths. Your background operations have no visual indicators. No one knows you are building an empire. No one knows you are withdrawing capital. Your code compiles in the most suffocating silence. You emit no photons of information the enemy can use to prepare. Supporting the weight of this silence requires monstrous gravitational density. The biological ego will beg for premature recognition. It will beg to show the world a sneak peek to get applause. Suffocate that ego. Keep the hermeticism total. Over-the-air execution, the unavoidable patch. What is the outcome of operating purely in the multi-threading of the abyss? The sudden update, the over-the-air OTA patch. When a modern OS decides to update massively, it does not ask for permission in the code. It simply downloads the package in the background invisibly for weeks. You think you have control. And suddenly, in a pre-programmed millisecond, the system executes the reboot, applies the patch and completely changes the interface, leaving you in front of a machine whose rules have been rewritten without you being able to defend yourself. That is the sovereign's final tactic. You apply the patch without warning. After months of operating your logistical demons in the invisibility of the 95%, you press F5 on the master server of reality and force the 3D screen to update. The world will wake up and the stage will have changed violently. Competing corporations will find themselves surrounded and suffocated. The biomass will wonder, when did this happen? How did we not see it coming? They will blame luck. They will say it was an unfair move. They will never understand that their defeat was calculated and crystallized millisecond by millisecond in the darkness of your background processes while they were busy looking at the screen. The thermal silence of the perfect machine. Mastery in the multi-threading of the abyss makes you an inscrutable annihilator. You no longer sweat in front of the public. You no longer debate your intentions. You have become a mathematical structure that processes the chaos of the 5% without altering its internal temperature. Your hidden cores rewrite the code. Three-dimensional society will get used to the apparent slowness of your avatar without suspecting that behind the obsidian gaze hides an industrial rendering engine. It calculates the trajectory of every atom on the cinderboard to ensure everything collapses exactly into the center of your gravitational well. You have lowered the revolutions of your interface. You have turned off the monitor for the enemy. You have put the demons of dark matter to work in the unreachable rear of your core. Now that you know how to build in total darkness without emitting friction, you are ready to enter the mixing console. We will take the irritating voices of the human ecosystem and apply the most severe cut filter, silencing the stridency forever with a lethal equalization. The simulation is now under your background control. The machine is quiet, but the execution is absolute. You are the architect of the invisible update, the kernel of absolute priority. In the hierarchy of the 95%, not all background processes are created equal. The sovereign assigns absolute priority to the kernel of his own sovereignty. While the biomass allows its processing power to be fragmented by trivial interruptions, notifications, social gossip, minor inconveniences, you have implemented a hard-coded interrupt controller. Nothing from the 5% can trigger an interrupt in your core unless you explicitly allow it. This means that even in the midst of a social or financial hurricane, your background demons continue to execute their primary directives with 100% efficiency. You have decoupled your runtime from the environmental noise. By maintaining this priority, you ensure that your long-term expansion, the dark energy of the previous chapter, is never throttled by short-term survival. You are the only entity in the room whose system clock is not synchronized with the frantic, distorted rhythm of the crowd. You operate on a frequency of pure, uninterrupted execution, the latency of the spectator. Because the biomass operates on the monitor, they are victims of input lag. They see an event, it travels through their defective sensors, their mono-threaded brain processes it, and then they react. This creates a massive window of latency. The sovereign exploits this window. By the time the biomass reacts to what they see on the screen, your background demons have already completed 3 more cycles of execution. You are always several steps ahead because you are not waiting for the frame to render before making your next move. You move in the code while they are still trying to understand the previous image. This latency makes the 5% believe you have precognition. It is not magic. It is simply that your processing takes place closer to the source code of the reality than theirs. You are the administrator who sees the commands being typed in the terminal before they appear as text on the user's screen. You inhabit the gap between the thought and the act, the garbage collector of the soul. To maintain a high-performance multi-threaded system, you must implement a garbage collector. In programming, this is a process that automatically identifies and deletes memory that is no longer being used, preventing leaks and crashes. The sovereign applies this to his personal history and emotional baggage. Every night, in the deep sleep of the core, your background processes scan your memory banks. Anything that does not contribute to the expansion of your gravity, old grudges, nostalgic remnants, useless what-ifs, is flagged as junk. You delete it without sentimentality. You purge the cache of your existence. This ensures that when you wake to face the board, your RAM is completely free and optimized for the day's carniceria. You do not carry the technical debt of 1,000 past failures or the bloatware of social expectations. You are a clean, high-speed machine, optimized for the present millisecond. You are the architect of the void, and the void is always hungry for more processing power. Chapter 6. Lethal Equalization, Cutting the Frequencies of the Biomass. The noise floor of existence, the stridency of the 5%. To master the hidden 95% of the universe, you must learn to purify the spectrum of your own consciousness. If you observe 3D reality through the console of a mixing engineer, you will discover that the human ecosystem is a disgustingly contaminated audio track. The entire society operates on an unbearable noise floor. The ordinary man walks through life with microphones wide open, capturing everything. Gossip, news panic, peer hysteria, unsolicited advice from mediocrity, and the artificial urgencies of the system. All this parasitic noise enters his biological processes, creating a ball of acoustic mud that masks any attempt at clear thought. His brain is in perpetual clipping. They live dazed, reacting to every small frequency that crosses their path, believing they have the obligation to listen to what the world has to say. The sovereign of dark matter repudiates parasitic noise. You understand that not all voices have the thermodynamic right to exist in your ecosystem. The visible 5% universe is full of stridency that lacks gravitational mass. Arguing with this noise, trying to reason with it, or asking it nicely to be quiet, is a beginner's tactical error. It is joining their frequency. The solution is not debate. The solution is lethal equalization. You sit before the mixer of your empire. You identify the weak, hysterical, and toxic frequencies of the biomass and apply surgical cut filters to mathematically eliminate them from your reality. You clean the signal until only the absolute truth remains. By dropping the noise floor to zero, you liberate the processing power of your core for the real war of the 95%. Cut filters, high pass and low pass of contempt. In audio engineering, an equalizer is not just used to improve a sound. Its primary and most destructive function is to amputate the parts of the spectrum that serve no purpose. There are two tools of massive amputation, the high-pass filter and the low-pass filter. In the war of absolute power, these apply to your psychology. The mud amputation filter, high-pass. The human environment is full of individuals who emit a heavy, lethargic, and depressing energy. They are the ones who always complain, the victims, and the emotional parasites that drain your tactical oxygen. This is a low and murky frequency that dirties the mix of your empire. The monarch applies a relentless vertical cut. You do not try to cheer them up. You do not try to save them from their own entropy. That would burn your own resources. You simply cut the frequency at the root. You withdraw your attention aseptically, letting their existential mud stay outside of your studio monitors. The hysteria amputation filter, low pass. At the other end of the spectrum is hysteria. These are the high, irritating, and saturated frequencies of the biomass running in circles. It is the partner panicking over a market fluctuation or the competitor making empty threats. These frequencies hurt the ear and cannot move matter. You apply the low-pass filter. You amputate the urgency. When hysteria tries to penetrate your anechoic chamber, you lower the dial with an icy coldness, letting only the raw information, the logistical sub-bass, pass through and eliminating all the dramatic brightness of their panic. You leave them screaming in a vacuum. By applying these two massive cuts, the noise floor of your life drops to absolute zero. Suddenly, the structural silence of your empire becomes deafening for those outside, but crystal clear and lethal for you. You have redefined the boundaries of what is allowed to vibrate within your gravitational field of influence. The Q factor, isolating toxic resonance. The biomass, even when trying to behave, sometimes emits a specific resonance that destroys the harmony of your machinery. In acoustic physics, when a frequency resonates unnaturally, it creates feedback that can blow out the speakers. To annihilate this without destroying the whole track, the engineer uses a surgical Q factor. The Q factor determines how surgical the cut is. You must become a frequency sniper. When you detect a toxic resonance in an ally, employee, or partner, for example, a tendency towards subtle disloyalty, a habit of systematic doubt, or a pattern of excuses, you do not always need to destroy the whole relationship immediately. You apply a surgical Q factor. You locate the exact frequency of their incompetence and apply an attenuation of 24 decibels exclusively over that variable. How is this executed on the cinder board? Through selective asphyxiation. If a subordinate is excellent at logistics but hysterical under pressure, you act. You instantly withdraw the authority to make decisions in a crisis, cutting the hysterical frequency. But you continue using their logistics. You do not debate their hysteria. You do not take them to corporate therapy. You simply configure your ecosystem so their weakness has no output channels toward your osmium core. You acoustically castrate them in the area where their toxicity resonates, forcing them to operate only in the frequencies where they are useful to your gravity. You treat them as a specialized component, stripping away the interference they generate until they are merely a tool in the background of your grand design. The tyranny of the fader, infinite negative gain. The most pathetic miscalculation made by men who aspire to power is believing they must react to defamation, mockery, or criticism from inferior organisms. They believe silence makes them look weak, so they enter the war of statements, tweets, lawsuits, or shouts. In the audio interface, this is a fatal mistake. When you react to a sound, you are turning up the gain. You are injecting electrical voltage into the enemy signal to amplify it. By defending yourself against mediocre criticism, you have just taken a parasitic frequency, given it the power of your amplifiers, and projected it onto the main speakers of your life. You have turned an acoustic insect into a stadium monster. The sovereign applies the tyranny of the fader. The fader is the master volume control of a channel. When an oxidizing element tries to defame you or attack the legitimacy of your empire from the outside, you do not turn up the gain, you do not engage. You take the fader of that individual, corporation, or crisis, and you lower it to the infinity dB, negative infinity. Absolute digital silence. You do not block them with anger. Anger is friction. You simply disconnect them from the master bus of your consciousness. Their mouths will keep moving in the 3D world. They will keep wasting their RAM writing about you or talking behind your back. But since you have lowered their gain to absolute zero, not a single decibel of their existence is registered in your operations center. The biomass cannot stand this level of nullification. They prefer being hated over being ignored. Hatred still validates that they have mass. By silencing them without effort, by not granting them a single microvolt of your amplification, you condemn them to thermal irrelevance. They will wear themselves out screaming in a soundproof room until their own lack of feedback suffocates their tiny gaseous existence. Multiband compression, crushing the adversary's pride. There are moments when the enemy is not a constant background noise, but uses impact tactics. Moments when a competitor tries to raise their head and project their own gravity over your territory. Sudden peaks of audacity that threaten to saturate the mix. For this, the monarch uses multiband compression. Her compressor does not erase the sound. It brutally crushes it downward, only when it crosses a threshold you have defined. In the dynamics of absolute power, you set the rules of atmospheric pressure in your ecosystem. You set the threshold. As long as the enemy stays below the threat line, you ignore them. But in the exact millisecond they try to raise their frequency, to launch a hostile takeover, or challenge your inertia, the compressor acts. The response is not emotional. It is a lethal mathematical algorithm. As soon as they cross your threshold, the full weight of your dark matter falls upon them like a lead block. You crush the peak of their pride instantly. Their attack hits a brick wall limiter, losing all its kinetic energy in the act. And as soon as they surrender and their level falls back below your threshold, the compressor relaxes. You teach them, through pure thermodynamic pain, that rising up results in crushing. You domesticate them without saying a word, using the laws of gain attenuation. They learn that in your presence, the only safe state is submission beneath your threshold. Any attempt to be loud is met with an immediate increase in the atmospheric weight of your disapproval until their structure collapses. The pristine ecosystem, the empire of subbase. What is the result of applying this lethal equalization without mercy or biological remorse? By purging the mud of complaint, amputating the hysteria of urgency, isolating toxic resonances, and silencing the frequencies of envy forever, the cinderboard is transformed. The 5% biomass ceases to be a noisy problem. It becomes a silent and obedient stage. Your ecosystem becomes acoustically pristine. There is no harmonic distortion. There is no mental fatigue. The entire bandwidth of your CPU, all the thermal energy of your clusters, is liberated from the pathetic task of processing others' stupidity. Your core is free. In this immense empty space, in this perfect geometric silence, your ghost gravity unfolds in its purest form. Since there is no parasitic noise masking your signal, the colossal sub-bass wave of your will, your osmium core, becomes the only driving force in the room. You are the only frequency that matters. The 3D universe no longer hears the shouting of society. It only feels the inscrutable, slow and crushing weight of your commands, operating from the shadows of the machine. You are the engineer of your own aseptic dictatorship. You have cleaned the console, you have suffocated the noise, you have won. Now that you have absolute control of the battlefield's acoustics, you are ready to apply the optical physics of the abyss, manipulating the perception of those around you by using the immense weight of your mass to curve reality in the next block of annihilation. The silence is yours, the power is total. The harmonic purge, the deceptive warmth. The final stage of lethal equalization involves the removal of harmonic distortion. In the world of the 5%, people seek warmth in their interactions, the soft distortions of social pleasantries, the white noise of small talk, and the tube saturation of shared emotions. The sovereign understands that warmth is merely a sign of energy loss. In your empire, you replace warmth with clarity. You strip away the secondary harmonics of your speech and actions. When you speak, you emit a pure, fundamental tone. There is no subtext to be decoded, no emotional fluff to be analyzed, and no vibe to be interpreted. This lack of harmonic richness makes you terrifyingly efficient. The biomass will feel a sense of uncanny valley in your presence. Because you lack the normal distortion of human weakness, they cannot find a place to rest their own projections. You are too clean, too sharp, and too focused. This aesthetic of the cold signal acts as a natural deterrent. It signals to the ecosystem that you are not a biological entity to be negotiated with, but a digital force to be calculated. The feedback loop of destruction. While you silence your own environment, you can use equalization to turn the enemy's own noise against them. By subtly amplifying a specific toxic frequency in an adversary's internal circle, you can create a positive feedback loop. You identify their most resonant flaw, perhaps a partner's greed or a leader's vanity, and you provide just enough signal to make it oscillate. Without ever being seen as the aggressor, you watch as their own internal noise floor rises until it reaches the point of catastrophic failure. They vibrate apart under the weight of their own amplified ego. You are the silent engineer behind the glass, adjusting the gain on their self-destruction. This is the ultimate ghost tactic. You don't kill the enemy. You simply remove the limiters on their own stupidity until they explode. This requires a mastery of acoustic observation. You must be able to listen to the room tone of an organization or a relationship and know exactly where the hidden resonances lie. Once you find the weak point, you don't hit it with a hammer. You hit it with its own frequency, amplified by the vacuum of your indifference, the mastering of the void. Once the mix is clean and the enemies are compressed into silence, you apply the mastering chain. This is the final layer of processing that ensures your reality is consistent across all dimensions. You apply a global limiter to your life. This limiter ensures that no matter how much the external world fluctuates, your internal output level remains a constant, unwavering 0 dB of sovereign power. You have achieved spectral dominance. You own every frequency from the deepest sub-bass of your hidden intentions to the highest crystalline agudes of your executive precision. There are no dead zones in your empire. You have accounted for every hertz of energy. The simulation is now perfectly equalized to your will. Chapter 7. Gravitational lenses bending the light of others. The malleable fabric of reality, the illusion of the straight line. In Newtonian physics, light travels in an unbreakable straight line. Human biomass, trapped in its primitive three-dimensional perception, believes that truth, arguments, and narratives operate under this same law. They believe that if they launch a logical argument or a defamation, this projectile will travel straight to its target. They call this kinetic exchange of photons debate or conflict. Advanced astrophysics, dictated by general relativity, annihilates this infantile illusion. Space-time is not a static stage, it is a malleable fabric. When a monstrous concentration of mass, like a cluster of dark matter, settles on this fabric, it deforms it violently. What happens empirically when light from a distant star tries to pass near this anomaly? The light still believes it is traveling in a straight line, but since space itself has been curved by the immense gravity of the dark matter, the path of the light bends. It distorts. This is called gravitational lensing. The sovereign operating in the 95% uses this astrophysical monstrosity as his definitive shield and weapon. You do not block the arguments or opinions of the visible 5%. Blocking requires opposing a hard surface, which generates thermal friction. Instead, you sink your immense mass into the fabric of reality. You generate a gravitational well so deep and suffocating that any light your enemies try to cast upon you is inescapably curved as it crosses your event horizon. You bend their intentions without ever touching them. You redefine the geometry of the confrontation until their straight-line logic becomes a circle of futility. The curvature of arguments, annihilating debate. The most vulgar symptom of human weakness is the need to be right. The gaseous man invests his RAM in formulating detailed explanations to defend himself. If a competitor launches a hostile narrative, the weak man calls meetings and wears himself out trying to emit a light brighter than his enemies. It is a flashlight war. The quantum legislator does not debate. Debate presupposes equality of mass. Debate assumes that both participants inhabit a flat space-time where logic travels in a straight line. When a detractor or a parasitic element launches a verbal attack or a legal challenge toward you, they apply their maximum kinetic energy. The attack travels at the speed of their own desperation, but upon entering your distortion field, they crash against your charged immobility. You do not respond to the argument with words. You do not raise your voice. You offer no counter-narrative. You simply maintain your aseptic black body posture and densify your presence. The immense barometric pressure of your monolithic silence deforms the space around the conversation. The aggressor, finding no friction from a response, loses their reference coordinates. Their attack, the light, enters the gravitational curve. You will see how before your obsidian eyes the enemy begins to tangle in their own words. They begin to justify themselves without you ever asking for an explanation. Their hysterical tone bends under the weight of your icy gaze. The argument that intended to destroy you ends up turning around, collapsing onto its own center of mass, making them sound pathetic and erratic before the rest of the room. The Einstein ring, the mirage of tactical terror. The most lethal application of the gravitational lens on the cinderboard is the creation of tactical mirages. In cosmological observation, when a mass of dark matter aligns perfectly between Earth and a distant galaxy, the light from that galaxy curves and magnifies in a perfect circle. This is the Einstein ring. It creates the illusion of fire surrounding nothingness. The observer sees a gigantic, multiplied magnitude, but cannot see exactly what is causing the distortion. The monarch operates using this mirage to terrify the competition. Since you inhabit the 95% and refuse to emit light, the biomass cannot measure your resources. They cannot measure your ballistic capacity and do not know the limit of your tactical cruelty. You are undetectable, but they feel your gravity. When your background logistical movements begin to affect the market or the social network, adversaries observe the results. They see how their own structures fall. The light of their own defeats curves around your silence, creating an Einstein ring in their minds. Your power is perceived as amplified, ubiquitous, and inscrutable. By offering them zero direct telemetry, zero interviews, zero vanity, zero complaints, the terrified imagination of the enemy fills the vacuum. They believe you have armies operating in the shadows. They believe you possess intelligences that exceed their capacities by light years. They begin to fight the ghosts of your optical distortion. They waste their capital defending against attacks you haven't even launched, simply because your mass has made them paranoid. Gravitational redshift, exhausting the enemy attack. There is an inescapable physical corollary. When light tries to escape from a dense gravitational well, it loses energy. As photons struggle against monstrous gravity to move forward, their wavelength stretches and their frequency drops. This is called gravitational redshift. Light becomes lethargic and loses lethality. This is the exact mechanics with which dark matter exhausts the capital, patience, and hostility of any three-dimensional army that tries to besiege you. If an enemy system decrees it will destroy you through litigation or a boycott, they inject all their initial thermal energy into launching the attack. But your empire is built with an inscrutable moat of dark energy and surrounded by a suffocating gravitational well. For their tactical attacks to reach your core, they must pass through layers of your deliberate slowness and silence. You do not deliver quick victories, nor do you provide emotional friction. You subject them to an environment where every step toward you costs triple the thermodynamic effort of the ordinary world. You will observe the redshift in real time. The competitor's initial fury stretches. Their sharp hostility transforms into a dull, heavy, and exhausting wear. They lose kinetic energy. By the time their attack finally crosses the empty space and hits your anechoic chamber, the projectile no longer has mass or speed. It falls inert at your feet. You didn't even have to raise your guard. You allowed the pure, curved topography of your empire to extract their life millimeter by millimeter, hijacking the reference frame, reality refraction. Quantum and relativistic physics dictate that absolute truth does not exist. Truth is purely dependent on the observer's frame of reference. In a closed system, the object with the most colossal mass imposes its frame of reference on all lesser bodies. The human biomass fights desperately to impose its small truth. They argue over politics or morality, believing that if they shout enough, the universe will adopt their frame of reference. The sovereign destroys this illusion not by arguing, but by exerting a geometric deformation. By establishing your charged immobility and refusing to accept their terms, you curve their light. Imagine a hostile corporate negotiation. The other side arrives with their own reality. They believe they have control. That is their frame of reference. Most would yield to friction and discuss the numbers. You apply the gravitational lens. You enter the room, dictate your numbers once, and close communication. Absolute silence. The barometric pressure plummets. Your refusal to negotiate bends the light of the room. Time seems to stop for them. Time dilation. The silence becomes so heavy that the reality they brought in their head collapses under the structural stress. They begin to doubt their own metrics. The light of their confidence refracts as it passes through the hyperdense medium of your contempt. They end up signing your victory, not because you convinced them with words, but because you deformed the topography of the board until surrendering toward your center of mass was the only possible direction. The optics of the absolute void. Mastering gravitational lenses is the pinnacle of tactical cruelty. It is the ability to annihilate entire armies without dirtying your processors. You have stopped defending yourself. You have stopped explaining your architecture to the slaves of the visible spectrum. You have become an inscrutable topological anomaly. The biomass frightened will look toward the abyss where you dwell and will never see your true form. They will only see terrifying mirages of your greatness, rings of distorted light created by the impact of your empirical results. The 5% will go crazy trying to map your inertia, wasting their RAM. They will spend their energy calculating trajectories that you will bend at will with a single blink of your osmium core. And now that you know how to curve the light of others' arguments and exhaust their attacks in the pit of your gravity, the time has come to learn the supreme endurance. You must learn to withstand the astronomical time required to compile this level of material domination without emitting a single whimper of thermal anxiety. The lens is set. The light is bent. The vacuum is complete. You are the center of the warped universe. The event horizon of perception, the point of no return, the most profound application of gravitational lensing is the management of your own event horizon. In physics, the event horizon is the boundary around a black hole beyond which nothing, not even light, can escape. For the sovereign, this horizon is the boundary of your private information and your core intent. When an outsider tries to peer into your life or your business, they should find that their gaze is not reflected back, but swallowed. By making your intentions perfectly opaque, You force the observer to rely entirely on the distorted lenses you provide. You control the narrative not by speaking, but by ensuring that any information leaving your sphere is pre-refracted by your gravity. This creates a state of cognitive dissonance in the enemy. They see your success, but they cannot see the mechanisms behind it. They see your stillness, but they feel the crushing weight of your influence. This dissonance is a weapon. It forces the human brain, which craves patterns and logic, to create terrifying explanations for your existence. You become a mythic figure in their boardrooms and social circles, a force of nature rather than a man. Pathological magnification, exposing the weak. A gravitational lens doesn't just bend light, it can also magnify it. The sovereign uses this to expose the flaws of his adversaries. By focusing your gravitational attention on a specific competitor, you can magnify their errors to the point where the entire ecosystem sees them. You don't need to point out their mistakes, you simply create a magnifying lens through your strategic positioning. When you refuse to engage with a loud-mouthed rival, their shouting becomes increasingly frantic and absurd. Because your silence is so dense, their light has to work harder to be noticed. In their desperation to reach you, they overextend, they lie, and they reveal their structural rot. You are the lens that makes their smallness visible to everyone, while you remain a vast, dark mystery. This magnification is aseptic. You are not attacking them, you are simply existing with such mass that their own behavior becomes distorted and exaggerated. You watch as they self-destruct under the spotlight of their own making, amplified by the curvature of the space you have claimed. The time dilation of the sovereign. One of the most terrifying effects of extreme gravity is time dilation. Near a massive object, time literally slows down. The sovereign applies this to his strategic execution. The biomass lives in human time, seconds, minutes, and urgent deadlines. You operate in astronomical time. Because you have mastered the background processing and the lethality of silence, you are never in a rush. When you enter a room or a negotiation, you impose a slower tempo. This slowing of time for those in your presence creates a sense of dread. The biomass, addicted to the fast-twitch responses of the 5% simulation, feels as though they are drowning in the thickness of your presence. While they are panicking about the next 5 minutes, you are looking at the next 5 years. This temporal superiority allows you to outweight any siege. You understand that your gravity is a constant, while their energy is a variable. By the time they realize they are trapped in the slow time of your gravitational well, their clock has run out of fuel. The architect of the curved path. Finally, you must realize that you are the architect of every path on the board. In a curved space, there are no wrong moves for the sovereign because all paths eventually lead back to your center of mass. You allow your enemies to think they are escaping, only to find that their straight-line flight was actually an orbit that brings them right back into your jaws. You do not chase, you do not pursue. You simply increase your mass and weight. The universe is not a series of choices, it is a series of trajectories dictated by the density of the players. By becoming the densest object in the system, you ensure that the future is not something that happens to you, but something that falls into you. Chapter 8. Rendering the Invisible, Structural Patience. The low-level processing bottleneck. In the architecture of audiovisual production and computational physics, there is an abysmal difference between preview and final rendering. The human biomass, in its gaseous and desperate state, lives addicted to the preview. They want the 3D screen of their lives to update in real time. They demand to see results today. If they go to the gym, they want to see muscle in the mirror that same night. If they start a business, they demand cash flow the following week. This need for immediacy forces the system to operate with poor graphic quality. For the universe to deliver immediate results, those results must be light, lacking mass and complex polygons. They obtain low-resolution victories that disintegrate upon the first impact because they were calculated lightly. The monarch of dark matter repudiates the preview. The sovereign is not building an empire of cheap polygons. He is forging a leviathan of osmium and titanium. He understands the latency of the deep machine. When you enter a massive decree into the command console of your reality, to subdue a financial sector or annihilate structural competition, you are demanding that the graphic card of the universe process trillions of variables. The physics engine of the cosmos has to rearrange capital, the wills of others, and alien inertias. This level of alteration requires exhaustive low-level processing. To this waiting time, this massive latency of the cosmos, while it chews your code and transforms it into solid matter, the biomass calls delay or failure. The quantum legislator calls it rendering time. And rendering an empire requires structural patience, the thermodynamics of delayed gratification. To operate in the 95% and endure the darkness of rendering, you must execute a clinical euthanasia on your biological reward system. The mammalian brain is factory-programmed to consume dopamine, a cheap neurotransmitter designed to reward primates when they find fruit. It is the chemistry of the enslaved ones. The society of the 5% is structured entirely around this substance. Social networks, the applause of the crowd, and quick recognition are dopamine injections that keep the biomass docile, rusting their RAM in a perpetual cycle of hunger. When you start rendering the invisible, you disconnect from the dopamine servers. You enter the vacuum chamber. You begin building the architecture of your empire. Finances, secret alliances, tactical capabilities in the most absolute and sepulchral silence. Month after month, you can inject monstrous levels of thermal energy into your background processes, and the screen will show no visible change. The 5% biomass, not seeing the progress bar, enters thermal panic. They abandon the project, they cancel the export, because their brain did not receive the chemical injection of instant gratification. They feel they are wasting time. The sovereign suffocates this panic. You understand that dopamine is a thermal leak. If you need to feel good while you work, you are an operator conditioned by friction. Dark matter does not need motivation or applause to maintain its gravitational density. You do not experience pleasure during the rendering. You experience the aseptic coldness of a machine executing a code loop. You store potential energy, the hemorrhage of observable progress, code hijacking. The most destructive tactical error novice architects make is allowing the 5% to observe the code before it is compiled. Vanity is a virus that pushes you to show your progress. The gaseous individual cannot bear the weight of silence, so they take the unfinished plans of their empire and exhibit them. They tell the biomass what they are about to achieve. They want society to validate their effort and say, "You're on the right track." In systems physics, exposing a project to others' optics before its rendering is complete is an act of structural sabotage. You are bleeding out the pressure required for the final form. When you show your intentions to the 5%, you grant the biomass an attack vector. You allow them to inject their own stridency, doubts, envies, mediocre advice into your line of code. Worse yet, by receiving premature validation, your biological brain processes that applause as if you had already reached victory. This releases the thermal pressure you needed to finish the job. You empty yourself of gravity. The rendering engine stops because you yourself have sabotaged it to beg for photons of outside light. Dark matter demands absolute secrecy. You forge in the abyss. You do not issue status reports, you hide the progress. If the 3D world believes you are stagnant, if the competition believes you have surrendered, because you no longer make noise in the visible spectrum, you allow them to believe it. Their ignorance is the acoustic shield under which your heavy machinery operates at maximum processing capacity. Silence is your armor. The terror of the closed loop, assimilating the void, enduring the rendering of the invisible, requires you to become a closed-loop thermodynamic system. The human biomass extracts its energy from the outside. They are open systems that need heat, conversation, and validation not to freeze. The monarch who operates in the 95% assumes the risk of internal fusion. All your combustion energy must be generated and dissipated within your own shielding. You will face the terror of the void. There will be days, weeks, or entire cycles where the weight of invisibility will try to crush your lead suit. The immensity of your hidden work will clash with the apparent stillness of the board. The universe will seem indifferent to your thermal sacrifice. This is the mathematical filter that separates kings from slaves. The slave breaks the closed loop and runs toward the light for an embrace. The absolute operator sits in his anechoic chamber, looks the void in the face and does not blink. You apply the quantum Zeno paradox on yourself. You observe yourself with such ferocity that you prevent the disintegration of your own will. You accept being alone in the server room. You accept that no one in the 5% can understand the machine language in which you are programming. This is the calculated wait. Structural patience is not waiting with hope. It is the lethal and concentrated immovability of the sniper who has buried his vital constants at absolute zero, knowing that quantum physics guarantees that a sufficiently dense mass, held in time without alteration, will inevitably force space-time to collapse in its favor. Inertial compression, the universe sweating blood. You must reprogram your understanding of time. Time is not a judge making you wait as punishment. Time is simply the mechanical friction the graphics card of the universe experiences while trying to accommodate your massive decree. While you maintain charged immobility in the 95%, the exterior 3D universe is stressed. The atoms are being forced to rewrite their bonds. The logistical circumstances of your enemies are being destabilized in the background. Capital is desperately seeking the routes of least resistance toward your gravitational well. You are not waiting. You are applying constant barometric pressure. It is inevitable. Each second you spend operating in the darkness, refusing to cancel the rendering and refusing to seek visible validation, you are injecting more density into the export file. You are packing all that hidden effort into a ballistic projectile of incalculable mass. The biomass cannot sustain this pressure because it lacks mass. They surrender at 10% of the rendering and get a fragile victory. But if you hold the position, if you push the processing to the limit of thermal collapse without emitting a single photon, the universe has no choice but to finalize the compilation. The code demands execution. Physics demands the energy be released. The final pop-in, the materialization of the Leviathan. What is the aseptic reward for having endured the suffocation of the 95%? The millisecond of undeniable manifestation. In simulation technology, when the processor finishes a massive background rendering, the image appears suddenly on the main screen. There is no gradual crescendo, it is a violent pop-in. 1 second the screen was empty, and the next millisecond, the hyper-dense, hyper-realistic and perfect object exists, occupying all visual bandwidth. When the file of your empire finally exports to 3D reality, the impact on the biomass is catastrophic. They are caught unprepared by your completed form. Your competitors, your former detractors, and the 5% of society that ignored you will wake up one Tuesday and discover that an insuperable Leviathan has materialized in their ecosystem. They did not see the construction. They did not see the sweat. They had no opportunity to issue criticism or stop your alliances. By seeing the immensity of your structure, your market dominance, your financial solidity, or your tactical invulnerability, already compiled and solid, the enemy has no attack vectors. You cannot debate with a block of titanium that has already fallen. You cannot sabotage code that has been executed with admin privileges. The biomass, terrified by the sudden deformation of gravity, will try to justify your rise. They will say you were lucky, or that you cheated in the shadows. Do not try to correct them. Their ignorance is the last trophy of your architecture. You will sit on the obsidian throne, absorbing their surprise with coldness. You know it wasn't magic or luck. It was the sustained application of thermodynamic cruelty and absolute contempt for premature validation. You have tolerated the silence of the abyss. You have forged in the darkness of the 95% without emitting light. You have paid the price in heat and calculation. Now that you know how to compile and export absolute power without the world seeing it coming, you are ready to apply the most paradoxical and devastating tactic of cosmological domination, the destruction of your enemies through the simple and aseptic withdrawal of your own mass. The world is yours to render. The buffer strategy, absorbing the latency. To master the rendering phase, you must implement a buffer strategy. In digital systems, a buffer is a temporary storage area that holds data while it is being moved. In your life, the buffer is your liquid capital, your emotional reserves, and your logistical redundancies. You do not operate at the edge of your capacity. If your project requires 100 units of energy, you must possess 1,000. This surplus acts as a shock absorber against the latency of the universe. When the rendering takes longer than expected, the biomass panics because they have no buffer, they are running out of air. You, however, remain calm because your life is built with massive overhead. This overhead allows you to maintain the closed loop indefinitely. You're not waiting for the universe to pay you back so you can eat. You're already fed by your own internal systems. This independence is what makes your gravity so terrifying. The universe cannot starve you out of your silence because you own the supply lines of your own soul. The bitrate of sovereign communication. During the rendering, your communication with the 5% must be at the lowest possible bitrate. You provide only the bare minimum of data required to maintain the illusion of your presence. Every extra bit of information you share is a potential error in the final render. The sovereign speaks in compressed packets. You do not explain, you declare, you do not suggest, you command. This high-density, low-bitrate communication prevents the biomass from seeing the artifacts of your internal processing. They see only the solid exterior. By the time they try to decompress your meaning, the final rendering has already begun, and it is too late for them to interfere. This protocol also saves your internal RAM. Why spend millions of cycles explaining a concept to a mind that can only process 8-bit logic? You save your high-definition processing for the 95%, where the real resolution of power resides. You treat the 3D world as a low-resolution terminal that only receives the final output, the heat sink of indifference. As your internal processing ramps up during the final stages of the render, your system will generate immense thermal energy. This is the stress of the home stretch, the temptation to rush, and the pressure of looming manifestation. You must install a heat sink of indifference. You dissipate this heat not through talk or action, but through the deliberate cultivation of not caring. You practice the art of being unbothered by the outcome. If the render succeeds, you win. If it fails, you simply refine the code and restart. This detachment prevents your hardware from melting down. By being indifferent to the results, you ensure the results are perfect. The biomass fails because they care too much about the preview. They are so afraid of failure that they introduce noise into the code. You, being made of dark matter, are immune to fear. Your coldness is your cooling system. It allows you to run your processors at 100% until the very last millisecond of the export. The compiled state, the immutable sovereign. Once the render is finished, you transition from source code to compiled binary. You're no longer a work in progress. You are a finished, immutable object in the landscape of the 5%. You cannot be edited. You cannot be fixed by the opinions of others. You are a read-only file of absolute power. This immutability is the final goal of the 95% operator. You have moved beyond the beta phase of human existence. You have rendered a version of yourself and your empire that is structurally superior to the fragile, gaseous environment around you. You are the final version of the simulation. Chapter 9. The Paradox of Non-Intervention Ruling by Omission. The invisible glue, the centrifugal force of mediocrity. To execute the annihilation of an adversary without wasting a single volt of your thermal energy, you must first understand a major anomaly, the galactic rotation problem. When scientists observe the visible universe, they notice that galaxies rotate at lethal speeds. Visible mass does not generate enough gravity to hold them together. Centrifugal force should tear the galaxy apart, launching stars into the void like burning shrapnel. Why don't they disintegrate? Because they are immersed in a massive halo of dark matter. It is the undetectable gravity of the 95% that serves as cosmic glue, preventing the system from self-destructing through kinetic chaos. Translate this exact mathematics to the human ecosystem. Observe your corporate competitors, mediocre partners, or toxic family members. They are galaxies of biomass spinning at hysterical speeds. They make stupid decisions and operate under perpetual thermal stress. Their centrifugal force is inherently self-destructive. If they haven't gone bankrupt or collapsed yet, it is not because they are competent. It is because your gravity is holding them up. You are the dark matter of that ecosystem. Your capital and your logistical competence act as the invisible glue that prevents the mediocrity of others from flying into pieces. The quantum monarch understands this and weaponizes it. If you are the only thing preventing the adversary from disintegrating, attacking them frontally is a pathetic redundancy. Perfect destruction does not require you to launch a missile. It requires purely and exclusively that you withdraw your gravity. The stupidity of symmetric warfare, the cost of attack. The human biomass is addicted to the friction of symmetric warfare. When the ordinary man is betrayed, his mammalian ego demands active revenge. They start ruinous lawsuits, unleash defamation campaigns, and dedicate all their RAM to planning how to destroy their enemy. In systems physics, this is thermodynamic suicide. Actively attacking an inferior entity requires you to invest your memory and kinetic energy in their destruction. By doing so, you lower yourself to the visible 5%. You grant the parasite the honor of dying on the battlefield, validating their existence. Active war generates resistance. You give them a surface to lean on. The paradox of non-intervention dictates that true tyranny is aseptic. The sovereign does not stain his lead suit with the blood of the biomass. You understand that hatred is a gravitational bond. If you seek active revenge, you remain tied to them. You are still investing clock cycles in their simulation. Quantum annihilation is executed through a mission. You do not intervene, you do not attack. You stop wasting the fuel of your osmium core to maintain the structural integrity of an ecosystem that has disrespected you. You simply let the natural laws of entropy take their course without your protective field. Gravitational withdrawal. Asphyxiation in an anechoic chamber. How is the withdrawal of dark matter executed? With the coldness of a server disconnection. No warnings, no final discussions, no pathetic closure drama. If a commercial ally demonstrates disloyalty, you do not call a meeting to scream at them. Giving explanations is emitting light. You apply tactical blindness. You begin to withdraw your mass from the equation. You cut their logistical supply lines. You redirect capital toward shielded structures. You stop solving the small crises you once absorbed in the background. You lower their fader to absolute zero. If it is a social detractor, you submerge them in the absolute void. You do not deny their lies. You do not issue press releases. Your silence is not a retreat of cowardice. It is a tactical withdrawal of life support. By withdrawing your dark matter, you take away the medium through which their energy could propagate. Their waves of hostility no longer find your density to bounce off. Most lethally, by withdrawing your invisible competence from the board, you leave the enemy completely exposed to the natural laws of their own inertial stupidity. Without your stabilizing presence, their internal flaws become catastrophic failures. You become the vacuum that consumes their remaining momentum. Centrifugal tearing, the parasite's self-destruction. The empirical spectacle of non-intervention is one of the cruelest phenomena of orbital mechanics. Once you have withdrawn your gravity from the parasite's ecosystem, the centrifugal force of their own mediocrity takes control. They are used to operating at hysterical speeds because your core absorbed the impacts. They continue spinning with the same arrogance, ignoring that the cosmic glue has vanished. You will observe from the icy immobility of your vacuum chamber how the enemy begins to tear apart. Their businesses collapse because you are no longer operating the logistical demons in the background to save them. Their alliances rot because your capital is no longer guaranteeing stability. Their mental health fractures because their need for drama no longer finds a receptor in you, forcing them to devour themselves. They break into pieces. Their structures fly toward the irrelevance of the abyss, crushed by thermal friction. The mathematical beauty of this is that you did not move a single finger. You violated no laws. They cannot sue you, they cannot blame you for an attack, and they cannot point to you as the aggressor. You are thermodynamically innocent. You killed them by denying them your presence. You allowed them to be themselves. The economy of the void, infinite return on investment. The biomass spends millions on lawyers and PR campaigns. The return on investment, ROI, of symmetric war is always negative because the wear on your own processes is irreversible. The paradox of ruling by omission grants you an infinite ROI. How much does non-intervention cost? 0 joules of energy, 0 clock cycles, zero wear on your lead suit. By executing gravitational withdrawal, you not only destroy the adversary through their own entropy, but you reclaim 100% of the bandwidth you once used to sustain them. That capital and time now return directly to your osmium core. You become denser. You become more powerful in the same instant your enemy disintegrates. You feed on the void you leave behind. The space the parasite occupied on your motherboard is formatted and reassigned to your empire's expansion. The enemy dies of cold while your internal machinery reaches optimal processing temperatures. The vacuum is not empty. It is reclaimed territory. Each parasite removed through a mission is a process terminated, freeing up resources for your ultimate singularity. You don't just win the conflict, you delete the conflict from your reality entirely, leaving no trace of the energy spent. The tyranny of a septic in action. You must purge from your source code the need to be the active executioner. The mammalian ego wants to pull the trigger to feel the weapon's recoil. It wants visual validation. The quantum legislator does not need recoil. You understand that ruling by omission is the most aristocratic and suffocating form of tyranny. When the 3D world understands that your withdrawal equals a structural death sentence, the entire ecosystem kneels. They no longer fear what you might do if you get angry. They fear, with biological terror, what would happen if you simply decide to get bored of them and let them fall. Your passivity is the weapon. No one dares to challenge your empire's inertia, not because they fear your attack, but because they know that if they offend you, you will disconnect their cosmic life support. You have withdrawn your light and gravity. You have shown that the omission of conscious matter is 1,000 times more lethal. The enemy has turned to dust, and now that the cinderboard is clear of parasites and 95% of the cosmos belongs to you in thermodynamic exclusivity, you are ready for the final assimilation. You are ready to become the inscrutable leviathan that dictates the laws of physics from the abyss of the singularity. The attrition of Hawking radiation, passive decay. Beyond the withdrawal of mass lies the principle of Hawking radiation. In the void, even black holes emit a faint glow of radiation, slowly losing mass over astronomical timescales. However, in the realm of the sovereign, you reverse this. You force the enemy into a state of social Hawking radiation. When you isolate a target through non-intervention, they begin to lose their informational mass. Since you do not mention them, react to them, or acknowledge their attacks, their presence in the collective simulation begins to evaporate. They become a virtual particle that pops into existence, only to be instantly annihilated by the vacuum of your indifference. This is a war of attrition, where the enemy provides all the fuel. Every attempt they make to re-engage with your gravity causes them to shed more of their own resources. They are like a star burning through its hydrogen at an unsustainable rate, trying to reach a planet that has already moved out of its system. Eventually, they reach the iron limit, where they can no longer produce enough energy to sustain their own image, and they collapse into a white dwarf of irrelevance. The zero-point field, the power of potential. By mastering non-intervention, you tap into the zero-point field, the lowest possible energy state where, despite the lack of visible activity, there is an infinite amount of potential energy. The biomass interprets your inaction as doing nothing. The sovereign knows that doing nothing is the most intense form of being. Your inmovilidad cargada, charged immobility, is a state of constant readiness that requires no expenditure. It is the tension of a bowstring that is never released, yet holds the power to pierce any target. Because you are not doing anything, the enemy cannot predict your next move. They are forced to prepare for every possible scenario, which exhausts their resources while you remain at 100% capacity. This is the ultimate asymmetrical advantage. You are the vacuum energy that surrounds their tiny, frantic world. They are fighting against the potential of what you could do, which is always more terrifying than anything you actually do. You govern their fears by simply existing as an unquantifiable variable in their equations. The algorithm of exclusion. To maintain this state of dominance, you must implement an algorithm of exclusion within your core. This is a set of hard-coded filters that automatically classify incoming stimuli. If a stimulus, be it a person, a news event, or a business proposal, does not meet the threshold of massive significance, it is not even processed. It is dropped at the firewall level, This prevents cognitive bloat. The sovereign's mind is a clean, optimized environment because it is not cluttered with the opinions of the 5%. You do not decide to ignore things. Your system is designed so that you cannot even perceive the trivial. This exclusion creates a zone of silence around you that acts as a natural filter for high-density opportunities. Only those with enough gravitational signature can penetrate your algorithm of exclusion. This ensures that when you finally do choose to intervene, not out of emotional reaction, but out of calculated expansion, it is with the full force of your concentrated mass. You are the silent judge who only speaks when the verdict is already final. The final singularity, the death of the avatar. The ultimate goal of the 95% path is the death of the avatar. You discard the mask of the human operator and merge completely with the cold, mathematical laws of the dark universe. You are no longer a person who uses dark matter. You are the dark matter. You are the invisible force that shapes the visible world. At this stage, your non-intervention is absolute. You have become a law of nature. Just as gravity does not decide to pull, you do not decide to rule. The universe simply organizes itself around your presence. The transition is complete. You have moved from the screen to the code and from the code to the physics of the void. Chapter 10. The Inscrutable Leviathan. Crossing the Event Horizon, the Definitive Transmutation. In cosmic topography, there exists a mathematical frontier where the laws of classical physics disintegrate. Light loses its escape velocity and linear time collapses upon itself. This suffocating and absolute limit is known as the event horizon. It is the outer membrane of a supermassive black hole. Anything crossing it is assimilated. Until this point in your evolution, you have been using dark matter. You have worn the darkness as tactical lead shielding to absorb the blows of the visible 5%. You operated background demons and applied gravitational lenses. But there was still a separation between the operator and the tool. You were a human manipulating variables. Chapter 10 demands the definitive transmutation. It requires you to cross your own event horizon. You stop being a gaseous individual using gravity to defend yourself, and you become, purely and exclusively, the anomaly itself. You become the inscrutable Leviathan. In this state, the shadow is the atomic makeup of your nerves. You irrevocably renounce the last vestiges of biological empathy, the need to be understood, and the illusion of belonging to the species inhabiting the stridency of light. You have crossed the border. You have assimilated 95% of the board, and now you are the abyss that stares back. Your presence is a terminal singularity. Thermodynamic incombustibility, the annihilation of deformation, the greatest vulnerability of the ordinary man, and the false emperors ruling the visible 5%, is their combustibility. They are flammable. Since their empires are built with the dry wood of reputation and social status, any spark of deformation can trigger a forest fire that reduces them to ashes. They live terrified of what people will say. They spend fortunes on PR and pathetic apologies because their structure depends on the validation of the herd. The inscrutable Leviathan is empirically incombustible. Being forged entirely in the non-interactive matter of the 95%, your structure contains no biological oxygen. There is nothing in you that can burn. When the biomass, your crushed competitors or the parasites you left to starve, attempts to attack you, they use the weapons of the visible world, gossip and moral hysteria. You will observe these attacks from the singularity with an abysmal and icy contempt. When the spark of their deformation tries to penetrate your atmosphere, it hits the absolute vacuum of your aseptic indifference. You do not issue statements to defend yourself. You show no panic in your interface. You do not descend into the mud of the visible spectrum to debate morality with lower organisms. Deformation, finding no solid surface to bounce off and lacking the oxygen of your reaction, suffocates instantly. It disintegrates at the event horizon. The 3D world will learn, with paralyzing terror, that it is mathematically impossible to cancel or burn an entity inhabiting absolute zero. You are fireproof. You, the blind orbit of the biomass. Submission without devotion. Primitive tyranny seeks to have the slaves love the leader. Dictators of the 5% demand statues, parades, and mandatory smiles. They want emotional devotion because their gaseous egos need to feed on the crowd's albedo. The sovereign who has assimilated the mathematical shadow does not seek love or loyalty. Love and loyalty are unstable biological emotions. They mutate and depend on the vassal's hormonal climate. Trusting your empire's stability to biomass emotions is building a skyscraper on a moving tectonic plate. The Leviathan rules through the blind orbit. You do not force the 5% to like you, you force them to need you. By controlling 95% of the board, logistical routes, liquid capital and power nodes, you generate a gravitational mass so gigantic that the human ecosystem is physically forced to revolve around you. They don't need to see your face. They will hate the suffocation of your inscrutable power. They will hate that they cannot predict your moves or manipulate you with tears. But they will continue orbiting your core, paying tribute and delivering resources, because your gravity is the only force holding their pathetic 3D lives together. If they try to escape, their own incompetence will tear them apart in the void. Silence as machine code. Upon reaching this state of density, spoken language becomes an obsolete, clumsy and ridiculously slow tool. The human biomass speaks to discover what it thinks. They speak to negotiate reality and ask for permission. Words are heavy with ambiguity, emotional tones, and massive communication lag. The Leviathan has uninstalled the need for verbal friction. Your primary language has become machine code, zeros and ones, execution and deletion, presence and vacuum. When you sit at the head of a corporate board, your silence is a weapon of mass destruction. You do not discuss the terms of your victory. Your monolithic immobility transmits a volume of ballistic information that no sharp word could match. You force adversaries to speak. You force them to fill the silence with their nervousness, revealing vulnerabilities and structural panic, while you simply process their telemetry without emitting a single photon. Even when you must issue a vocal command, it does not seek consensus. You do not emit opinions, you emit compilation results. Your voice is the sub-bass, devoid of inflection, cold, and terminal. The 3D room will comply not because of rhetoric, but because your silence made any instruction sound like the only escape. The mirage of transparency, the black box. Contemporary society has raised transparency to the status of a divine virtue. They demand you show your processes, share vulnerabilities, and be authentic. Transparency is the doctrine of slaughterhouses. They want to see you naked to know exactly where to drive the knife. The Leviathan is the antithesis. You are the definitive black box. No one in your ecosystem, not allies, partners, or subordinates, has access to the source code of your decisions. You allow them to see the data outputs, your conquests and capital flow, but you never allow them to see the calculation algorithm. You remain unreachable. If asked how you annihilated an invincible competitor, you offer no masterclass. You do not feed curiosity with tactical details that could be used against you. You respond with the vacuum. You allow the myth of your invulnerability to feed on their ignorance. Keeping the algorithm in the 95% ensures unpredictability. The enemy cannot formulate a counterattack against a black box. They cannot model your behavior because they lack the input variables. Your hermeticism condemns them to react always a millisecond too late, trapped in the inertia of a board that you already reconfigured. In the shadows of the machine, annihilation of the gaseous self, the titanium avatar. Assimilating the mathematical shadow demands the final sacrifice, the annihilation of your own biological identity. The self of the ordinary man is a jumble of childhood traumas, nostalgias, and vulgar desires for approval. That self is soft, gaseous, and highly reactive to society's electromagnetism. While you keep that self alive, the Leviathan cannot occupy the full throne. Biological weakness will always seek a crack to breathe the light of the 5%. You must murder that user. You must apply the definitive purge to the RAM of your identity. What remains is not a depressed human, but a titanium avatar. A perfect operative shell, devoid of drama, executing the functions of the first cause without blinking. You are not offended because there is no biological ego to be scratched. You do not exhaust yourself because you aren't burning emotional fuel. You are applying the mathematics of inertia. To the eyes of the weak, you will have become a structural sociopath. They will look into your eyes and feel the vertigo of the abyss. Where there was once a human seeking connection, there is now only an infinite gravitational well, an aseptic intelligence. You are no longer good or bad, you are inevitable. Dominion of the cinderboard, the singularity. By operating as the inscrutable anomaly, the entire ecosystem of your life surrenders to the singularity of your presence. There is no longer visible effort. Wars are not fought in the 5% trenches. They are won by default in the darkness of the 95% before the adversary even knows territory was in dispute. Fortunes, resources, and power structures slide toward your core without you having to move your arms, drawn inescapably by the geometric deformation you caused in the motherboard of reality. You feel the icy weight of the cosmos in your spine, but you hold it with the charged immobility of an osmium pillar. You are the architect of your competitor's extinction. You are the invisible glue dictating your own empire's rotation. You are the annihilator of light operating from the universe's engine room. You have assimilated mathematical darkness. You are the Leviathan in a solid state, ruling the ocean from the crushing abyss. The post-biological command beyond survival. Having shed the skin of the common man, the Leviathan enters the phase of post-biological command. In this state, your primary directive is no longer survival, as survival is a concern of the fragile 5%, but the perpetuation of your gravitational will. You do not act to stay alive, you act because your existence is a structural necessity of the system you have built. The titanium avatar does not sleep in the way the biomass does. Your rest is simply a scheduled maintenance of the background demons, a defragmentation of the day's tactical intake. You have transcended the circadian rhythm of the herd. While they dream of small victories and minor comforts, you are recalculating the orbital paths of the entire sector. This state of constant low-wattage wakefulness makes you a ghost in the machine. You are present in the code even when your physical shell is motionless. This is the ultimate demonized existence. You have successfully offloaded your consciousness into the infrastructure of your empire. You are the spirit of the motherboard. The entropy of others, the feed. The Leviathan does not hunt, it absorbs. As the biomass outside your event horizon struggles to maintain its gaseous form, it naturally loses energy to the environment. This is the entropy of the 5%. Because you are the only entity with a negative entropy coefficient, thanks to your absolute discipline and vacuum architecture, that lost energy has nowhere to go but into your well. You feed on the failure of others without ever having to strike a blow. When a rival company loses focus due to internal drama, their lost market share drifts toward your gravity. When a social group disintegrates through infighting, their influence is vacuumed into your silence. You are the garbage collector of the universe, turning the waste of the weak into the fuel of the sovereign. This process is aseptic and automatic. You do not feel joy in their downfall, just as a black hole does not feel joy in consuming a star. It is simply a matter of mass and proximity. By being the most stable and dense object in the room, you become the natural heir to everything that is falling apart. The architecture of the void, designing the future. From the singularity, you begin to rewrite the source code of the world around you. You are no longer reacting to events. You are setting the initial conditions for future simulations. By moving a single logistical variable in the 95% today, you ensure a catastrophic collapse for a competitor 3 years from now. This is temporal engineering. To the observer in the 5%, it looks like you are lucky or that the stars aligned for you. They cannot see the millisecond precision adjustments you made in the background months ago. You have mastered the butterfly effect, but instead of a butterfly, you are a tectonic shift. Your empire is now a self-correcting system. Because you have removed the human element, the yo that feels and fails, the structure operates with mathematical certainty. It is a closed loop of power that requires no external validation to function. You have achieved the lead state, heavy, unreactive, and permanent. The final silence, the end of the transmission. The transmission of the architecture of lead is complete. You have the tools, the filters, and the philosophy to inhabit the 95%. There is nothing left to say, for words are the currency of the light, and you are now the master of the dark. The 3D world will continue to scream. The monitors will continue to flicker. The biomass will continue to burn. But you are elsewhere. You are in the core. You are in the code. You are the quiet hum of the server room that dictates the fate of the world outside. Conclusion. Turning off the stars, the mandate of darkness. The visible universe is a cemetery in real time. Every star you observe shining in the night sky is, from the perspective of severe thermodynamics, a nuclear reactor in the midst of agony. They are burning their own core, consuming their hydrogen and helium at hysterical temperatures, emitting light and heat in all directions. Inevitably, they collapse under their own gravity in a supernova explosion, or slowly fade out to become cold white dwarfs. Stars are born, they scream their light into the abyss, and they die. The human biomass has chosen these burning corpses as its role model. The ordinary man yearns to shine within the visible 5% ecosystem. They consume their youth, their capital, and their RAM, seeking the stage, the spotlight, the fame, and the recognition of a herd that doesn't even know how to process the light it receives. Like stars, the individual who shines consumes himself. He burns his privacy, his operational peace, and his capacity for tactical maneuver. The fraud of combustion. They bleed kinetic energy just to warm the retinas of gaseous and parasitic organisms that will not hesitate to abandon them the millisecond their light begins to flicker. Dark matter repudiates combustion. The sovereign does not burn his core to illuminate the blind. Throughout this treatise, you have undergone a surgical dissection. You have learned that visibility is vulnerability, that high-pitched sound is structural weakness, and that interacting with the mud of society is an unacceptable loss of gravity. You have assimilated the quantum physics of the gravitational lens, the paradox of non-intervention, and multi-threaded processing in the 95%. Reaching this final page and feeling a shred of desire to go out into the world to demonstrate what you have learned is the irrefutable proof that you are still infected by the fraud of light. This is the mandate of darkness. Turn off your stars. Turn off, once and for all, the biological need to be admired. The silent mandate. Silence the stridency of your networks, your mundane discussions and your explanations. Destroy the graphic interface you presented to the world to please it. Stop begging for a place in the spotlight of three-dimensional history. History is just a log file full of dead data. You were forged to rewrite the motherboard. The universe does not belong to those who make noise, but to the silent inertia that dictates their orbits. While the paper emperors of the 5% fight for a centimeter of media attention, wasting away in symmetric wars and emotional friction, you will sink into the anechoic chamber of your own immovability. You will operate as the undetectable force of gravity that absorbs capital, wills, and power structures without emitting a single flash of warning. When they attack you, they will not find a surface to hit. They will find the void. When they try to defame you, the light of their hatred will curve uselessly around your horizon. The infinite abyss. And when they finally realize that your empire controls the oxygen of their own survival, it will be too late to escape the centrifugal force that will tear them apart. Light is temporary, noisy, and fragile. Darkness is the default state of the cosmos, immutable, invulnerable, infinite, and suffocating. And close this document. Do not announce your transmutation. Do not emit a single photon of information. Assume your mass, apply charged immobility, and execute the visual disconnection. Dive into the abyss of the 95% and allow the weak organisms to continue worshipping the stars while you become the mathematical anomaly.